Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening today, or whenever today is when you're listening to it. I am meeting with Tenny Amin, who we've talked about family law before, but I had reached out for for lack of a better word, a very special podcast conversation to have with Tenny in light of what's happening with the immigration customs enforcement raids happening, or ICE, in the US, and specifically under discussing family law, mostly in California, but federally, if we can discuss, or a lot of this advice is purposefully general, but it does have a California lens, and it's all about how to create a safety plan for your children if you are an undocumented parent, or maybe you are a neighbor or friend of undocumented parents. And also, we're going to discuss, well, if you haven't done this plan, or the different aspects of maybe guardianship or other safeguarding and activities, what are your rights? And then what are your rights as an undocumented immigrant in general? And then we're also going to talk about, like, really get into the different things that should go into this safety plan, this worst case scenario, how to do the best by your children. So I really thank you so much for joining us today, Tenny, and please introduce yourself, your experience, thank you.
Well, I am a family law practitioner. I am the co-owner and managing partner at a firm called TALG, and we are a multi-jurisdictional law firm. We have 7 offices throughout the United States, and we're soon to be global in Dubai. Our specialties are business, biotech, and intellectual property, but I specialize mainly in family law, and I've been a family law practitioner throughout my entire career for the last 23 years. Um, with regard to the issue that we're talking about today, I think when we talk about immigration enforcement, the conversation's usually focused on the adults, the parents that are detained or deported. But today, I'm focusing my conversation on the children and what happens specifically to US citizen children if parents are detained and deported, particularly because this is an area where immigration and family law tend to collide more so now than ever.
In this situation, immigration law I usually associate as a federal law, and family law, custody, I associate as a state law. Often when they clash, federal is king. How does
Mhm.
that work in this situation?
So you're right. Normally, federal law will supersede state law, with the exception of family law courts. Family law courts are like the grandfather of all courts that take precedence over everything. So, with regard to family law, immigration status does not make a difference in custody proceedings in family law. In fact, the code in California specifically is very clear that immigration status is not one of the factors that the court considers when they are looking at the best interest of the children. So when I go to a custody proceeding, I'm actually prevented statutorily from bringing up the immigration status of the other parent. It's not a factor. It's nothing that we can talk about. It doesn't mean that you're unfit. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose custody. It absolutely has no relevance in the California Family Law Court. And family law is state by state. So California has their set of rules. Nevada will have their set of rules. We practice in 7 states. But that idea that immigration status does not affect custody proceedings in a family law court is pretty much universal throughout the United States.
And that sounds like something important to know, because when you're in an abusive relationship, a controlling relationship, that's just another thing hanging over your head, where the abusive partner could say, you can't leave me, you're undocumented, they're going to take away our children.
100%. And you'd be surprised the number of times I have clients sitting across from me in this office who tell me with such zest that their partner is undocumented, and the blank look on my face doesn't satisfy that urge, but there is nothing that is not a factor in any way, shape, or form in your custody proceeding. The court will look at how you treat the child. They will look at a number of factors to determine best interest of the child, but your immigration status plays no part in that whatsoever.
Wow. And I don't know that even I knew that. And I think that's a really important thing to emphasize. So thank you for sharing that. Now, what happens? We're going to talk about this safety plan,
Mhm.
but this is the worst case scenario. And it's happening quite suddenly in a lot of mostly American cities.
Mhm.
What happens if you are a parent of an American citizen? What happens then? We've heard things in the news this week that are heartbreaking,
Of
but
course.
what is triggered and does it
Okay.
depend on the age of the kid, et cetera?
So, first of all, this conversation isn't about fear, it's about preparation. Because planning ahead, it's not giving up your child, it's protecting them. And a child's citizenship doesn't shield them from chaos, it just guarantees they can't be deported with it. So, what I'm talking about are children that are Americans by birth, but they're still vulnerable to a system that moves faster than families can react. So, in a situation where a undocumented parent is detained or deported, normally in that kind of a situation, if there is another parent who has status or a next of kin, we're talking about a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, any sort of a relative who can step up and say, I will take care of this child temporarily, let's start there, then that situation will move down a different path. Let's say there is not that person.
Mhm.
Okay. Let's start with there is not that person, and this child is quite literally left alone. They were with single parent, or both parents were detained and deported. That's a situation where you will have Child Protective Services step in. Child Protective Services, CPS, they don't enter families because of immigration status. They enter when there's no adult left standing. So in that case, the child will be taken by CPS and they will enter what we call dependency court in California. And dependency court, it isn't about blame, it's about who has legal authority when no one has planned for tomorrow. So what that means is the child will be placed in a emergency foster care situation. You know, we've always heard of foster care, but we have actual emergency foster care homes that specifically deal with that interim period before a child is actually placed in a home. Child is placed in emergency foster care, and then the court starts dependency proceedings. And dependency proceedings are when you don't get to choose. So we have guardianship and we have dependency, and the difference between those is who gets to choose. In dependency, the court will get to choose. So the court will have a court hearing where they will try to figure out who is the parent, are they here, are they fighting for their child? Clearly, if they're detained or deported, they can't do that. The next steps move very fast, and that's the scary part. Child will be placed in foster care, and they will either remain there or the foster parents have the option of adopting the child within 6 months to 1 year if that parent doesn't come back. So now you're in a situation where you didn't plan and the court system moves so fast. Your child is in dependency court. They've moved from foster care to a possible adoption. And now your parental rights are terminated because you were not there to say anything about it. Now, if you come back, your time has lapsed. So that's the scariest situation if you have absolutely no one to step in.
What if in that situation you get suddenly kidnapped and deported, and then how does from abroad where you cannot re-enter the country, how
Mhm.
can you still, that child probably has the right to live in your home country or your birth
Yes.
country. I don't want to call it their home,
Yes.
but how does that parent then reach out for their child? I can't imagine most
Yep.
parents, unless their children, the reason I heard about this was on a podcast, someone talking about a neighbor with a 17-year-old American citizen, 6 months from graduating high school. She made this choice she was asked by the parents for the emergency guardianship. They've made this decision. It's the best friend. The
Mhm.
kids are best friends, things like that. But in another situation, you can understand a parent not wanting a kid to be with a stranger because this kid was
Of
not
course.
taken away because of abuse or anything. So how could they get there? I cannot. Courts are typically very slow, so it's
Yeah.
shocking to me the 6 to
Yeah.
12 months. But then, what can the parents do then in that situation? I hadn't considered that.
So, in a situation where they physically cannot be present, even remotely, to attend these dependency hearings, the case moves forward without them. The court can't not make decisions with regard to who takes care of this child because they're waiting on you to be able to appear at a court hearing. So, if you're in a position where you physically can't be present at a court hearing, which is the case with a lot of these individuals, it's not as though they're being given access to lawyers and court hearings in these detention centers, the case will move forward without you. Now, if you can appear or you can have an attorney appear on your behalf and say, argue for me, then that attorney can say, this is the sole caregiver. Their immigration status doesn't terminate their parental rights. They get to choose to remove that child with them to their home country where they're being deported, and that can happen very well. But the problem that we're seeing is family law lawyers who also work in dependency court, which is what I do, is that these parents don't have the voice to even say that to the court. They are completely gone. They are nowhere to be seen. We do not know where they are. We have no way of reaching them. If we can reach them, we can't get them to actually appear in court. And the court in that situation, family law dependency, it does move fast. Courts work slow, but dependency moves faster because we're dealing with minors. So the court, when there's no caregiver in place, they gain control over placement. And there are fast timelines, high risk, and parents that are in detention or outside the US, they face serious barriers to participation. So if you want to avoid that situation, there are ways to avoid it, but that requires being prepared. That requires thinking ahead and not living in fear, but in preparation.
Okay, before we create that safety plan or that plan of
Mhm.
action,
Of
I just have a couple questions that came to mind.
course.
In the situation of a relative, you don't have a formal situation, you haven't created formally, but abuela, abuelo, or
Mhm.
a second cut, whatever is available. How do these officials
Mhm.
know that this is happening? Like, how are they even going through the process of finding the sister of the
Yeah.
person that's being deported, etc.? These people are getting absorbed into the system and
Mhm.
they're in a bubble where they're not at getting their one phone call like we have the
No, of
stereotype
course.
of jail.
So
So what happens
in
then?
so if you don't have a caregiver plan, which we'll come to, okay, what
Mhm.
typically happens is CPS takes this child, parents are in detention, and let's say you do have a sister who lives in Arizona. She has no idea what's happened, right? So the child is given counsel. They're called minors counsel. And my husband and I actually take on minors counsel cases on a no cost basis just to help out the court system. So you are given a pro bono case. You are assigned a child and you are quite literally that child's voice. Now, that becomes your job to locate these relatives. Okay, so you do have CPS and investigators helping you. It's not quite as difficult. We have a lot of ways of locating people now. If the child can speak and tell you, then that's obviously even more helpful. So we will contact those individuals and we will say, this child is in CPS, I'm minors counsel, I represent them. This is the next hearing. Would you like to appear and ask for a temporary guardianship? Do you want to ask that the child be placed temporarily with you as a foster parent? And then depending on what happens, the child is either returned to the parent, they're taken to the other country where their parent is, or maybe you adopt them. So we do reach out. We will do that. In that case, let's say that we find someone, or let's say there is someone, let's say there's a relative who lives close by and they contact us and they say, I can take temporary control over this child. Fantastic. We turn the child over to them and that's fine. But now they run into problems because unless they go to court and they get a probate guardianship that's initiated by them, where they can retain parental rights, they can have that child for a temporary period of time, but they can't enroll them in school. They can't make medical decisions for them. They can't do a lot of things because they are not, unless the guardianship court gives you guardianship, it's a short-term emergency band-aid, right? It's not long-term care. So my hope is in that situation, that person would contact someone like me or a family law lawyer and say, I have this child. Everything happened really fast, but I need to be able to make decisions about this child. What do I do? They're now not in dependency court. They're in guardianship. They're in probate guardianship, in which case they can now go get legal guardianship of this child. They can now enroll the child in school. They can consent to medical care. They can prevent CPS involvement. So we're already looking at family law courts, dependency courts, guardianship, probate. There are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to say. So it is a confusing system. It's confusing for me, and I've been a family law practitioner for 23 years. My heart hurts thinking of someone, especially if the English is not their first language, trying to figure this out, which is why it's important that even if they can't afford a family law lawyer, go to the self-help center in a family law court in your county and explain to them what's happening, and they will guide you with what
Okay,
you
that's
should be doing.
very helpful. And so that's the first step if you know someone has been detained or deported.
Yes.
What if you don't know, but you've suddenly lost contact and things could happen? Where do you call then?
That's difficult because now you're in a situation where you have to try to reach out to CPS or try to reach out to a dependency court and find out, is this child with you? Can you give me, and dependency courts, we are very careful in protecting the children and not releasing information about them.
Hmm.
So you run into a situation where you are knocking on doors that aren't opening for you. So you almost have to wait for that court representative to contact you and say, are you able to care for this child? You're not going to get anywhere by trying to contact the dependency court. They won't legally release that information to you. Which
Okay.
is
And then
why it's important for the purpose of this, why you need to do a caregiver authorization affidavit.
and just one other question that
Yeah.
I can't believe I have to ask in 2026, but before we get into setting up this safety plan, can an American child or any child, even an undocumented child, be detained at the detention centers? Because I personally don't want my kid, my 8-year-old, with his passport around with him.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
they lose things. But can they be held in detention centers?
If they are undocumented or their status is not known, yes, they can be.
What
ICE
is it?
cannot deport.
Status not known of an American citizen. Status not known. What does that mean? They just don't have their passport on them because
They
kids are
don't
allowed
have
to
their passport on them. But we have ways of checking immigration status even if you don't have a passport. You're in the system. So our hope is that they would check to see if this child is a US citizen. If they are, a US born child remains a US citizen regardless of their parents' immigration status. ICE cannot deport a US citizen child. That child will then be turned over to dependency court. They
Okay.
will be turned over to CPS and that whole process will start. If they are without status, if they are undocumented, yes, they can be deported. The hope is that they get deported with their families, but I can't say for a fact that that's what's happening right now. But a lot of situations that we have, the children are US citizens, and so they're placed in one of these court systems.
Okay. So now we're going to still hope that people are not kidnapped and deported, but how can they prepare for this? What are the things they need to do?
Well, you can always have caregiver instructions that you can write in advance. One positive thing is that California, specifically in October of 2025, the governor signed in a new plan, a new law that's taken effect January of 2026, and it allows for what we call caregiver authorization affidavit. And the reason why this was so amazing, and I'm surprised that it wasn't more in the news, specifically in California, because it was honestly a big breakthrough, is this affidavit is useful for relatives, but even non-relatives like neighbors. So it would allow for school enrollment, basic medical care. It's not custody, and it may not be durable for long-term separation, meaning you would still need to seek a stable option like probate guardianship, like I discussed. But California now allows you to download a simple form that you can get online, and it's a caregiver authorization form. And that form is part of the Family Preparedness Act of 2025, and it expands who can give caregiver authorization. So that means that it's now been expanded to fifth degree of kinship. That's huge because it used to be close family members. This law in California has meant that great aunts, cousins, they can use the affidavit to make medical decisions that previously were limited to blood relatives. You can enroll the child in school, you can consent to medical care. It strengthens planning tools for families, in other words. So this was huge. This was a really big breakthrough, and it's called AB 495. That was the law that went into effect, and you do not need a court order. You can get the correct form. It's a statewide statutory form. It's not county specific. It's freely available online. It's mainly on the court system, but a lot of legal aid sites. And now a lot of schools have this for parents too. There's no filing fee. There's no court filing that's required. So the caregiver, not the parent, the caregiver, they complete and sign the affidavit. So let's say you're a caregiver for me. I come to you with this affidavit and I say, you have to fill this out. Okay. Jennifer, you state that you're going to care for the child. The child will live with you. And the reason is if the parent is unavailable by way of detention, deportation, illness, it's not just for detention and deportation. It was for that purpose, but you can also say for illness, any other thing, right? It's signed under penalty of perjury. It doesn't need to be notarized. California law does not require that. It can still be valid, but if you're going to listen to your family law attorney for credibility issues, especially in high conflict immigration situations, get it notarized. Okay. That caregiver will provide that to the school, to the child's doctors, and they will keep a copy of it. Parent will have it too. Let's say you get detained or deported. That caregiver now has that caregiver affidavit. They can present it to law enforcement, to the child's school, to the child's doctor.
That's amazing. And we will, of course, include a link to this
100%.
for everyone. And please, this is why we're doing this. Please do share that. Wow, that is incredibly powerful. So, what I keep thinking with things like this, and this seems very powerful, and school, I assume school data is protected at the level of HIPAA. I don't know. I doubt, but I know that the healthcare, I understand that. But in situations where people have targets on their backs
Mm-hmm.
and they have to make hard decisions about who to tell in case this happens because you don't want to draw attention.
Mm-hmm.
So in this situation, are schools a safe place for this data to be held?
100%. I can say for California they are. I don't know what's going on in other states, but This caregiver instruction doesn't necessarily say I am undocumented. So here's a target on my back, and I'm handing you an affidavit that lets you know that. It does not say that. It just says, in the event that I'm incapable of
Okay.
caring for my child, this affidavit is notarized and signed by the caregiver I have chosen. I would like you to have a copy. They will have a copy. And it's important to know this doesn't transfer custody. This doesn't terminate your parental rights. This doesn't override existing custody orders. It's not as though you are now putting this person in your shoes as a parent to this child. This is for a emergency temporary affidavit that allows you to be a caregiver. But the most important part is it's recognized by the courts,
Mhm. And is
has
this a
valid
situa-
statutory authority.
and this emergency caregiver could be someone on a green card, or I guess we recommend in this crazy time a US citizen, or does that affect it in any way?
It doesn't affect it in any way, but I wouldn't take my chances and have someone who is also undocumented or whose immigration status is pending do a caregiver affidavit, because now you're putting the child in a situation where if you are also detained or deported, we now have to, we're back at square one. We're back in dependency court and probate guardianship. So find someone you trust. It's a big ask. But I've helped plenty of people fill out caregiver authorizations. I've had plenty of people come to me and say, I want to have this person elected as a caregiver. I heard California courts allow us to do that now. How do I even get involved? So I want to prevent my child from having CPS involvement. And I mean, it's legally valid, it's not bulletproof. But right now, we have someone who can step into your shoes as a caregiver and make actual decisions for your child they would be prohibited from doing before.
And it's wonderful because it's something that they don't have, they could do in their home because some
Yeah,
people, a lot of people, probably millions of people are not leaving their homes.
absolutely. No cost, doesn't have to be filed. It's valid until it's revoked by the parent or the caregiver, right? And
Mhm.
it doesn't automatically expire. I mean, its strength will diminish over time, but this is to be done before deportation and detention.
And I could be wrong, but in California, it's a little different from other states, but children have access to healthcare there, no matter what.
Yes.
So it's not tied to their parental employment when their parents cannot go to work because they are afraid to or because they are already kidnapped or detained.
Well, and if you're in a situation where a child is to receive some sort of medical treatment, typically they will ask for a parent to sign off on it,
Mhm.
right? If
Yeah.
you're in a situation where you don't have this caregiver authorization, you may not be able to consent to this child receiving medical care. And I'm not talking about emergency medical care where they have to
Mhm.
stabilize you. I'm talking about something different, like a child requires surgery of some kind or whatnot. You won't be in a position where you can consent to that if you don't have legal guardianship and or a caregiver authorization. And legal guardianship, it's not an easy thing to do. You're in probate guardianship. That is a long process. There are hearings on whether you're fit enough. Courts have to weigh in on the best interest of the child. This kind of sidesteps all that.
Mhm.
So it's helpful.
What else should undocumented parents be keeping on them? What should they be keeping in a secret pocket of their kid's backpack? Or because I guess it deeply varies of the age because you
Of
might not
course.
tell your 6-year-old they're undocumented, their parents are undocumented because they might not think and tell someone, etc.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
and so what are we keeping in this worst case scenario ready for these kids? And we know we're going to keep a copy of that form that we just
Mhm.
talked about, the AB 495. What else should be in there? The
So
kids
I would
go
say keep copies of that form. in several different places. Have it with the caregiver, have it with someone else who's not the caregiver, someone who might be home when you're taken, or, maybe an employer if you trust them. Leave instructions. Absolutely have emergency contact letters with emergency contact information. Again, if that child is taken by CPS into dependency court and they have an emergency contact letter with information, for someone like me as minors counsel, you've just made my job so much easier because I actually have emergency contact information from you. Another thing to do is get medical consent forms. Go to your doctor and get medical consent forms. Make sure that you have these consent forms ready to go where you as a parent give medical consent to this individual. And this gets a little technical, but I would do it if I was in that situation. Have guardianship nominations. Because like I said, the caregiver affidavit is a short-term solution, but it loses its power over time. You can have a document where you provide guardianship nominations. If I'm unable to come back within 6 months, if I'm unable to be reunited with my child, I agree to have so-and-so step in as a legal guardian. You've now made your plans known. You have medical consent, you have copies, you have a caregiver authorization, you have a guardianship nomination. It's a lot, but I help families put all of this together. That way, there's no dispute over placement, and your children are not, in a sense, your life is taken from you, and now your children could very well be taken from you, and you will lose parental rights once they are placed in an adoption, possibly in a foster care.
So a guardianship, if you've created a legal guardianship situation, you still retain parental rights at some point. There's no that guardian, as long as there's, I guess, some sort of contact, because years could go by,
Yes.
people get
Yeah.
lost.
It could be a temporary guardianship. It could be a revocable guardianship where you say, this is not absolute, but rather than just have this person be a caregiver, I want this person to be a legal guardian. And that has to be someone that you can trust because this person can move with the child. They can take them out of state now. The door is open to a lot more responsibility in a legal guardianship position than it would be in a caregiver. But you want to be able, if you're anticipating not coming back, then you want to move that from a caregiver at some point to a legal guardianship. So do a guardianship nomination. Have your medical consent forms ready to go. Notify the school. Give them a copy of the affidavit.
Okay, and I guess where are some other safe places? I guess religious institutions tend to be safe havens, right?
Yeah, religious institutions. Now, with a new law in California, schools are not required to provide immigration status of any of their students to immigration officials. So schools are definitely one of the places that I would turn to trust. I would provide it to school faculty administration or a teacher. So, I mean, detention doesn't come with a warning, and childhood doesn't pause while adults sort out the paperwork. So what turns a family crisis into a legal crisis is the absence of a plan. So once you have that plan, it's easier. If you can get an attorney involved, I would say do it. Give that affidavit to an attorney, give your medical consent forms to an attorney, give the emergency contact form to an attorney. If that child is able to say, call this attorney, we can take it from there. And we can step in and handle all of that for you.
And this is something, again, that could be done remotely if people just don't
Absolutely.
feel safe to leave their home and go to, maybe specifically, you would think they'd be lingering outside the offices of immigration
Yeah.
lawyers and family law and things like this.
Yeah.
They're lingering in schools, so it's
Yeah.
all, yeah. Just as we wind down, I just want to do a reminder, like, what is someone's rights if someone who's a bad neighbor called ICE, because that's happening, a
Mhm.
bad person, and they come knocking? What are your rights as an
Oh, you mean,
undocumented?
you mean in terms of what can you assert?
Yes, versus with your children home, not home? If they come knocking, do you have to answer that door, etc.?
Well, unfortunately, we're kind of in a gray space right now where we've recently had Supreme Court rulings with regard to what constitutes, reasonable suspicion or probable cause. So my advice would be that if you're going to be in a situation where they are going to come knocking, safeguard your children first and foremost. You cannot answer the door the first time or the second time, but you are almost in a sense delaying the inevitable. So rather than focusing on what can I do not to be caught, my purpose is, look, California has quietly created a lifeline for families who need time, not a courtroom. So take advantage of that. Find stability for your child when everything else in their life feels uncertain. And a plan doesn't mean that you're expecting to leave. It just means that your child's not going to be left behind. It's legal protection.
What advice do you give to neighbors? How can we support our undocumented neighbors?
I would say if you're in a situation where you're comfortable with that person, and I've done this for individuals that are in my life that are undocumented, is I've explained this to them. And I've said, I will sign a caregiver affidavit for you. You may not know me well enough to know that I can take over your child forever, but at least you will know in the interim, in the event of an emergency, they can come to my home, they can live with me, I can take them to school, I can take them to the doctor, but I need you to fill out this affidavit. I can go with you to get medical consent forms. So speak up, offer them this gift really that they may not know about, because that might be something that they don't even know exists. Not everyone's listening to this podcast. I hope they do. I hope people do and they share it. But if enough of us know that there is this path and we suggest it, then that relieves an enormous amount of stress and burden off a parent. I did this for a parent recently who I know, and she's walking a lot calmer and less stressed today than she was before this.
That's wonderful advice. And how can you also support like the children in this situation besides this? But if you know someone else that has emergency guardianship or these different situations.
I think the best thing you can do to support these children, from my perspective, is making sure that there is a caregiver in place, because it is traumatic for children to go from a family situation to be taken by CPS and placed in emergency foster care and then to be in dependency court. Now, I'm someone who operates in dependency court, and I can say we try to do everything we can to cushion that. But this is the first time these kids have been with another family. They have a lawyer. It's me. They don't know who I am. I may not speak the language. We might need to use an interpreter. It's a scary place to be. So if you know children and you want to take care of them, make sure that their parents are aware that you're willing to be a caretaker. That's really important.
That's beautiful. Is there anything else I should be asking you? We've talked about a lot.
Yeah, I know we've covered a lot. Again, I'm surprised that a lot of people don't know about this. It's sad. I think there's a lot of reasons why it's not being, making people aware of the situation, but we should. But really, that's it. It gives children school, healthcare, and stability when everything else feels uncertain, and that can make the difference in a child's life forever.
And while we're talking about the context of California, I encourage everyone to look what their state has,
Mhm.
as this seems like a very good best practice that every state should have because, well, we can only prepare so much.
Yeah, and look, California, we have a law that requires courts to actually accept these affidavits as law. That might not be happening in your state,
Mhm.
but nevertheless, prepare the caregiver instructions, because someone down the road in the court system will read that and will help you.
And don't use AI for this, please. Please
No,
don't use AI for any legal
no,
documents, please.
no, this is not information that's readily available to everyone on ChatGPT. This is specific information. It's a specific form. There's specific ways that you have to fill it out and steps that you have to take. So we'll provide you with the link and information with regard to that to make it easy for you. And like I said, your family law self-help center and a family law attorney. Not so much an immigration attorney, but this is in the realm of family law. A family law attorney should be able to help you with this, unquestionably.
And if you are an immigration lawyer, educate yourself on this because there's a lot of
100%.
gray area in your work. And hopefully, this feels like something that I think your advice of where to go to get this information, the family law helplines, family law self-service, everything, the family law courts in your state, probably every state has these resources. Those are better than the Google results AI or anything in AI.
100%.
This is not a time for that. Use it
No,
to plan your
no.
vacation, not this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tenny, for having this crucial conversation with me and giving this exceptional advice. If people want to get in touch with you, what's
If
the
you
best?
want to get in touch with me, our website is talglaw.com. All our information is there. It's TALGLAW.com. And my email, my phone number, and all of our firm information is on there. And I would be more than happy to answer questions or even just shoot me an email and I can send you a link to the form.
That's really great. Thank you. And thank you to our listeners. Please share this far and wide. I'm gonna this is a useful use of AI. I'm gonna
Yeah.
generate a transcript from AI and
Yeah.
then proofread that transcript and then have it translated into Spanish. And so we can have that option for Spanish and English that help people understand better in subtitles and a transcript in Spotify. Share these unique resources, not unique, this specific resource, because this is not hearsay. This is what Tenny does for a living, helping people. And I am so grateful for your generosity. And I wish everyone, I don't want to say the best of luck, the best
Yeah.
of the worst of times. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you.